What is going on YouTube? I am Lamont at Large, and today we are at the Memorial Park Cemetery here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Laura Jean Voss, June 27, 1964 to April 16, 1985. Laura was riding in the back of a motorcycle. They were on Interstate 44 here in Tulsa, and an 18-year-old driver crossed the median and hit them head on, killing them both instantly. Eric Matthew Rutherford, beloved son and brother, September 1st, 1979 to February 6th, 1997. Eric was walking down the street when he was hit from behind by a pickup truck being driven by a 25-year-old man. And when the police came to interview him, he said that he was driving down the street and the lights were very, very low, and just plowed right into the back of him. He didn't see him in time. It's just an accident. This is the first time I've ever seen a stone of a person with pictures as they progressed in age throughout their life. Very interesting. I love this stone. It's fantastic. Rest in peace to Carol Ann Moss. This is Christa Voss, October 30th, 1975 to June 9th, 2009. Christa was described by her friends as just an all-around great person, a fantastic athlete, just a pleasure to be around. At the time of her death, she was the assistant professor of biology at the Tulsa Community College. And on that day, she was riding her bike with a couple of her friends along Highway 51 in Sand Springs when somebody came and ran them over. Her, along with her friend Matthew Edmonds, both died at the scene. Later on, the person that hit them fled. She was later caught, and she was pulled over. The officer that pulled her over noticed that she had a very strong odor of alcohol on her breath. That woman's name is Tasha Borland. She was immediately arrested and booked into the county jail on 2 charges of vehicular manslaughter along with DUI and leaving the scene of a crime. This woman is no stranger to the law. In 2007, she had a previous arrest for DUI. So apparently she did not learn her lesson, and because of that, she killed 2 people. She bonded out of jail for $100,000, and eventually she pled to those charges, and Oklahoma does not play. She received 24 years in prison. 4 of those years are going to be suspended, so she has to do 20 years in prison. She gets out, she'll be on probation for 10 years. In my opinion, that sentence is not long enough. And I was really hoping that this wasn't one of these cases where somebody gets 5 years and they get out. So every day when she sits in prison, she gets to think about the people that she killed. Gastineau, 1930 to August 11th, 1967. At the time of his death, James was a cattle rancher. He was living out here in Oklahoma, and he died in an airplane accident. His plane went down. This here is Leon Russel, April 2nd, 1942 to November 13th, 2016. So this guy is a singer-songwriter. He's not a famous guy, but of course, many of you out there, if you're watching my video, you're gonna say like, oh my God, how dare you say that? I know Leon Russel. Well, he was famous, but I never heard of him. He didn't really have many big hits, but if you know that song, it's called A Song for You, that probably is his biggest hit. When he was 14 years old, he got his start here in Tulsa. He was a piano player, and he would play at some nightclubs here in town. Very, very famous session player. This guy has played for the Beach Boys, Joe Cocker, Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr, many, many people, and he worked for Phil Spector, Murderer. Phil Spector. He was a piano player on a lot of Wall of Sound recordings that Phil Spector made very, very famous, and then later on in life killed somebody. Anyways, rest in peace to Leon Russel, and guys, go look up that song, A Song for You, if you've never heard it. It's a beautiful song, for sure. Yeah. We had an angel and didn't know it. Her beauty, splendor, sweetness, and grace gave joy and love to this worldly place. She hurried through life, touching so many in her own special way, like a candle burning brightly and then flickering out too soon. For one brief shining hour, she warmed so many with that glow. This is Nancy Beth Dennis, June 12, 1963 to October 7, 1982. She was 19 years old when her and her friend Philip John Davies, 21, were both killed in a car accident. According to Oklahoma State Patrol, Nancy appears that she lost control of her vehicle, possibly overcorrected, and it overturned, killing them both. They were both pronounced dead at the scene. And at that time, both of them were students at Oklahoma State University. That year, at the time of they both dying, 852 deaths out here on the roads and highways in Oklahoma. That is a lot. That is a lot. I don't know where they were coming from, but the accident happened around 1 o'clock in the morning. Rest in peace to both Nancy and Philip. I was walking around the cemetery and some guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, are you looking for any cool graves to visit?" And I said, sure. I thought he recognized me at first, but he didn't. He said, "Let me take you to this grave." So he shows me this grave. This man's name is R.D. Hull, and he's buried along with his wife, Lula. So this guy is the inventor of the spin cast fishing reel, or the closed face fishing reel, depending on what article you want to read. Now, this guy revolutionized the sport of fishing with his invention, right? So he comes up with this thing, so he needs a company to help develop it. So he goes to a company called the 0 Hour Bomb Company. They're a maker of fishing products, anything related to fishing. So he takes his invention to them, and they help him, fine tune it, and they start like a mass assembly line of making these things, because this thing is it's a total game changer in the sport of fishing. So he wanted to send the very first reel that came off of the assembly line to President Eisenhower. So they package up the very first reel and they send it to the White House. So the White House, they get a package that says 0 Hour Bomb Company, and it sets off a panic in the White House, and everybody starts scrambling. They probably throw this thing into an extra. They're like, what the heck is this thing? And they opened it up, and it was a fishing reel. And then they called the company. They're like, well, what is this? And they said it's a fishing reel. And they're wondering, well, why does it say bomb on the package? It's like, oh, that's the name of our company. So because of that, the manufacturer, they changed their name to Zebco, which is short for 0 Hour Bomb Company. So if you are a big-time fishing enthusiast, you can thank this man right here for making your job a lot easier. So rest in peace to RD and Lula Ho. So we go from the grave of a man who revolutionized the sport of fishing to the grave of a man who is just a real bag. You ever known those types of guys? They're just a real bag. What kind of bag? I don't know. Use your imagination. Put whatever you want in that bag, but that's definitely them. This man's name was Garland Rex Brindley. Definitely not a man that you want as a neighbor, and definitely not a man that you want to cross. That's for sure. He's the kind of guy that if there was a shooting, he would pick up his child and use them as a shield. Very selfish individual. He was all for himself. So Garland is from this area of Oklahoma, around the Tulsa area. And he was the kind of guy, he wasn't very book smart, but he was tenacious when it came to advancing in life. So not a smart guy, but he took up the skill of plumbing. So he worked as a plumber, and then he went out on his own, starting his own plumbing company, and he was making hand over fist cash. He was doing so well here in Tulsa that he bought a market in the area. And a lot of the kids in some newspaper article that I read online said that when they would go into his market to read the comics without paying for them, he would like start cussing them out and chase them out of his store. This guy was not a very nice guy, to say the least. So this guy, he starts making more money than he really knows what to do with. And that's what separates rich people from people that are not rich. They just have the the wanting of, having a nice lifestyle. So this guy's making really good money. He ends up, I believe, buying a ranch out about an hour away from here in the Tahlequah, Oklahoma area. So he sets up shop over there, and he buys a nightclub, and then he buys a 38-unit apartment building. So this guy's making very, very good money. But this guy, he's a weirdo. You know why? Because as much money as he was making, and he was making about $500,000 a year, I believe, in just his plumbing business alone. Now, this guy was a thief. You would think if he wanted like a nice truck, he would just go buy it, right? No, this guy would steal it. He had a couple arrests on his record for cattle theft and truck theft. That's the two things he loves stealing. I'll steal me a cattle, I'll steal me a truck. I'm not gonna pay for it. Don't know why this guy did that, but he did. So when he buys this nightclub, he has a little bit of competition in the bar/nightclub area of Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Now at the time, Tahlequah is a very small town. There's only about 8,000 people that live there. 3 bars, 8,000 people, And he wanted to start kind of like a dance-themed nightclub. But for some weird reason in Oklahoma back in those days, back in the 60s, you could not own a nightclub that sold beer where they allowed people to dance. Can't make that up. Yeah, you're not allowed to dance if you sell beer at a nightclub. It's either one or the other. But there was a catch in that law. If you had a hotel that had a nightclub and you sold beer, then you could allow people to dance. So this guy built a one-room, quote-unquote, hotel in the back of the bar, and he called it the Tab. So there you go. But what about those other nightclubs? Now there's 4 legit nightclubs in the Tahlequah area. Competition, right? Well, this guy didn't like competition. He didn't like it at all. So in 1967, December 4th, 1967, a series of bombs went off, and of course they were timed. So one bomb would go off, boom. About 20 minutes later, boom. 30 minutes, an hour later, boom. And they happened to be at the other nightclubs in the area. Well, gee, that's funny. Gee, that's real funny. So in the process of within maybe an hour and a half, you had 3 bombings where 3 bars/nightclubs were utterly destroyed. Gee, that's funny. But the bombings didn't stop there. There was a bombing at a drive-in movie theater. And also there was a man who got injured in a blast. His name was Bill Bliss. So this guy, Bill Bliss, I think he was the assistant prosecuting attorney in that county. He goes into his truck and boom, thing blows up. Luckily he survived. Now who could want Bill Bliss killed? You have a series of bombings. You had a drive-in movie theater bombed. Also, you had the local area newspaper bombed. So you have about 6 or 7 bombings in the area. Who was the Tahlequah bomber? We don't know who the Tahlequah bomber is. I mean, what man is going to want to be setting off a bunch of bombs in Tahlequah, population 8,000? I mean, who knows? So the bombings stop. So one day, Rex is what they called him. Rex is outside his nightclub, and there's a truck out there refilling his propane. Don't ask me why, but in those days, when you would call a truck to refill your propane, you had to use a certain company. You couldn't just use another company that would probably give you a couple cents off per gallon at a cheaper rate. You had to use what was assigned to you. So Rex says, screw that. He hires another company to bring him propane. So some guy in town, I don't know why he even bothered, he notices that there's a different truck refilling his propane tank. Now, this guy owned a business in town. I don't know what the business was, but he knew for that weird law that you cannot have a other propane company providing you propane. So he goes up to Rex and he says, hey, that's illegal. Stop. That's terrible. I guess it would be the earlier version of a Karen. And Rex looks him dead in the eye and he says, you know all those bombings that were going on back before? And he said, yeah. And Rex looks him right in his face and points in his chest with his big fingers. He said, that'd be a shame if a bomb were placed right outside of your business, right next to your propane tank. Now, wouldn't it? And that guy turned as white as a ghost and hightailed it out of there. Rex was not a guy to be messed with. Remember when I told you that this guy was a thief and he loved stealing cattle and trucks? Well, a truck goes missing from a local dealership in the area. It was a 1971 Chevy short box with a camper, right? Nice truck, I guess. Okay, cool. So this truck is, it was stolen. And for some odd reason, a man by the name of Don Bolding, he knew Rex. He didn't like him. And when the truck came up missing, immediately he knew that Rex stole it. So Don's brother Gene Boulding was the chief of police of Tahlequah, Oklahoma at the time. So he goes to his brother and he says, I believe I know that Rex stole that truck. I said, because he's a thief. He's a scumbag. I bet you he stole that truck because 2 days prior, I just happened to pass the dealership and he was looking at that truck so hard. I bet you he stole it. So the chief of police gets a couple of officers together. And he says, hey, next time if you see Rex, just kind of keep your eye on him. And here's a picture of the car that was stolen. Well, lo and behold, not even a week later, they see the truck being driven by a woman that worked for Rex Brindley. So they pull her over and they run the tabs, and it comes back to like a 1954 Dodge pickup truck or something. That ain't the truck. So they look at the VIN numbers, and like obviously this guy is like filed down the VIN numbers. He altered the numbers. They eventually get a hold of Rex and they charge him with auto theft. Again, this guy owns a 38-unit apartment building, a very successful plumbing company, and the only nightclub in town because he bombed the others probably, right? So what is this guy's problem? This guy's probably making $1 million a year now, but he just can't stop stealing. He's one of those types, you know, those rich people that they keep getting richer and they'll cut anybody's throat just to get overhead in the competition. So this guy, he gets arrested and he finds out who snitched on him. It was Don Boulding. So this guy says, okay, I'm going to get even with him. I'm going to get even with him. Rex often used younger kids in the area because there was a school, I don't know the name of it, but it was in the area of Tahlequah, Wagoner, Muskogee, kind of that general area. So this kid named Ralph, he would do, you know, odd jobs for him, other things, crimes, who knows. So he tells Ralph, he said, hey, do you know anybody that knows how to make a bomb? And as a matter of fact, of all people, he says, actually, yeah, I know a guy named Archie. He was a Vietnam vet. He's kind of crazy. He's like hooked on heroin, but he can show you how to build a bomb. He's like, all right, cool, let's go talk to him. So Rex and Ralph, they go over to Archie's dilapidated one-room apartment, and Rex asks Archie, hey, show me how to wire a bomb to the ignition system of a truck. Now, guys, Rex knows how to build bombs. He just doesn't know how to do the intricate part with the wiring and all that. So Archie, being some form of a demolition expert and a Vietnam vet and a hopeless drug addict, shows him how to do it. So on February 2nd, 1971, Rex and Ralph, they go outside to Don Boulding's house and they see his truck out there, right? So he has Ralph stand guard with a shotgun just in case Don comes out. Because if Don comes out, he said, just kill him. So he wires the bomb to the truck and then they both leave. So Don's wife, Dorotha Boulding, she comes out to warm up the truck to take their 5-year-old daughter to school that morning. And she goes to the truck, she puts the key in the ignition, turns it, and just boom, just the loudest explosion you would ever want to hear in your life. You could probably feel it for at least 2 blocks away, perhaps even more. The bomb was so powerful, it blew her body 100 feet up into the air across the street. She was killed instantly. After the police and, you know, paramedics arrive, I mean, there was absolutely nothing they could do. She was almost beyond recognition. And you got the FBI involved because this is out of the scope of the, you know, county sheriff's department, what have you. And a bomb expert said that, I guess he called it overkill. Like there was so much explosives used to mangle up that truck and to kill whoever was going to start that truck. I mean, it was beyond enough to kill somebody. So you had those bombings at the other bars, nightclubs or whatever, and Rex is already kind of people have already kind of, been rumors that he was behind those bombings. So the police and the FBI, they really started investigating this Rex Brindley clown. And finally, people start snitching. They get a hold of Ralph. They get a hold of Archie. And they confess that, I showed him how to do it. So all three are charged with the first-degree murder of Dorotha Fern Bolding. Of course, the bombing was supposed to be for Don because he had called the police and told them that he stole that truck. So now he graduates from cattle thief and truck thief to cold-blooded murderer. So this guy goes on trial for her murder. He's found guilty and he's sentenced to life in prison. His story does not stop there. A few years into his sentence, he escapes from prison. I believe it was the prison in McAllister. So he escapes with some other inmates, and he actually got away for about, about a little over 6 weeks, maybe between 6 and 7 weeks. So this dude made it from McAllister, Oklahoma, all the way down to Biloxi, Mississippi, gets a job as a plumber and rents an apartment down there, is just living his life like nothing happened. And then you had the FBI and the county sheriff's department keeping an eye on the Bolding house because they're thinking that this guy, escaped prison, that he's going to come out and come after Don. So eventually this guy was recaptured just as the FBI was going to put him on the top 10 most wanted list. So he had about 45 days of freedom. He gets locked back up. He got caught down at Shreveport, Louisiana. He gets locked up. He gets thrown back in prison. No, but this isn't his only escape. No, he has another one up his sleeve. So he escapes a few years later again. He gets away for about maybe a little over a week, a little under 2 weeks. And this guy was hiding out in the woods in Oklahoma. But of course, if you are aware of the terrain in Oklahoma, there's a lot of nasty things in the woods. And he finally gave himself up and he walked into town, into McAllister, and turned himself in simply for the fact that he was getting eaten up by mosquitoes and ticks and chiggers and all of that. So he gets rearrested again. Now, you'd think this clown would be moved to like a more higher secured prison site. And I don't know if he was, but there was a prison riot or something was going down, and they were doing a cell search, and they actually found a loaded gun in his prison cell. How do you sneak a gun into prison? I have no idea. They found I think it was a .25 caliber gun and some other things he wasn't supposed to have. Definitely not the gun. So finally they said, okay, this guy he's something else. Now, I don't know what they did with him afterwards, but they probably put him in solitary confinement. And I don't know how many years he did in solitary confinement, but I've spoken to people who have been in solitary confinement, and it definitely makes you go crazy. Even the most hardened man, when it comes to just your mind, will go crazy if given enough time in solitary confinement. No sunlight, everything is hard, everything is gray. I mean, it really gets to you at the end of the day. This guy could have been such a successful businessman. I mean, I said earlier before he was making $1 million a year. Okay, maybe I was being a little bit over presumptuous, but I'm pretty sure he was doing quite well. I'm pretty sure he was doing pretty damn good. But just people just remember this guy as just being just a mean guy. One of the reporters had asked him a question. I guess they were doing a story on the bombings or whatever. And he told the reporter, I'm a nice guy, but don't mess with me. They called me the rattlesnake, because if you mess around with me, you're going to hear my rattle. And he fancied himself an outlaw. He called himself the Oklahoma Outlaw. I mean, talk about just a waste of just a murdering scumbag. At the end of the day, that's all it was. He could have had a cool little life. Been a cattle rancher, owned a club, apartment building. But no, he wanted to murder, and he was just a greedy person. I think his grave is right here. There he is. I was looking for you. That is Garland Rex Brindley Jr., the Oklahoma outlaw, Tahlequah bomber, and overall bag. So there he is, guys. Wow, you could have been your own vlog the way I was going in on you, man. But anyways, payable on death, as I always say. Okay, on to the next. This is Nicholas Todd Martin, October 8th, 1990 to December 31st, 2010. Nicholas was shot and killed giving a ride home to a friend of his. He had dropped a girl off in Broken Arrow, and the girl's either boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, a man by the name of Mario Liddell Phoenix, was waiting for her. And an argument ensued between the people who were giving his girl or ex-girlfriend a ride home and them, and he pulled out a gun, like the coward that he is, and shot two people, wounding one and murdering Nicholas right here. He was eventually arrested and convicted of the first-degree murder. He was serving life in prison in a prison here in Oklahoma. Panta Lou Lyles, December 5th, 1924 to May 15th, 1945. At the time of her death, Panta was 19 years old, and she worked for an aircraft manufacturer. She was married. Her husband was serving overseas during World War II. Per usual, Panta's friend, who worked as a nurse overnights at a hospital here in Tulsa, would call her to wake her up in the morning because she had to be at work. She would call her, hey, time to wake up. So her friend calls her on the very early morning hours of May 15th, 1945, and somebody picked up the phone, and she says, well, like, what the hell is going on? And there was a voice over the phone, a very gruff voice, and he said, call back later, and he hung up. Immediately, her friend called the police and was very concerned because Panta wasn't the type of woman that would be having any man come into her apartment, especially with her being married. So she calls the police and says, hey, I just called my friend and some guy answered the phone, and that's not like her. The police rush over to her apartment, and by the time they got there, they found Panta in her bedroom on her bed, dead. She had been bludgeoned with some kind of a heavy object, maybe a pipe or a hammer or something like that. When they did their investigation, they seen that the killer had came in through the, they believe the kitchen window. They did an autopsy on her and found that she had been sexually assaulted after she had been killed. During that time in Tulsa, there was a man going around the area killing women and sexually assaulting them afterwards. Panta was the fourth victim. There was a total of 5 victims. The first victim was 19-year-old Helen Brown. The next 2 victims were mother and daughter, Clara Stewart, 48, and Georgia Green, her daughter. She was 33. All the women were beaten with heavy, blunt objects, sexually assaulted, and then the killer would make breakfast in their kitchens and then leave. Now, police started getting some tips, and a man named Leroy Burton was arrested and charged with Panta Lou Lyle's murder. Now, they had grilled him for the better part of 2 or 3 days. And during that interrogation, who knows what they did? Maybe they put their hands on him. Maybe they smacked him up a little bit. He finally confesses to the murder, and he's sentenced to life in prison. However, later on, his conviction was overturned because he told the judge or whoever, I was basically tortured. They would throw me in a hot box and they forced a false confession from me. I didn't commit these crimes. His conviction is overturned. He's set free. He immediately leaves the area and heads over to Gary, Indiana, because he has a job waiting for him over there. So the police, they're keeping their eye on him from Tulsa over in Gary. 2 months after he's freed, a 5th victim, 45-year-old Ruth Norton, is found bludgeoned to death. Same MO. Same exact MO. Obviously, Leroy Burton couldn't commit the crime because he was in Gary, Indiana, and his employer confirmed that he was at work, and people that lived with him said he was in Gary, Indiana. A couple of years later, police started getting tips about a man named Charles Floyd. He was a 52-year-old truck driver. He lived in a junkyard, and he happened to live in the area very, very close to one of the victims that had been murdered. They get to Charles Floyd, and they talk to him about Panta's murder. Not only did he confess to the murder, but with intimate details, he explained what he did, and he explained the layout of the apartment. Only the killer and the investigators could know such intimate details of the crime. However, he was unable to be brought to trial because he was deemed insane. He wasn't fit to stand trial. Mental illness. So the judge ordered him into a mental hospital, and he was, for the rest of his life, kept in an insane asylum. And that is where he died in 1968. So those 5 murders, including this woman's murder, Panta Lou Lyles, technically remain unsolved. But the police feel that Charles Floyd was responsible for those murders. She so loved the Lord. Ensign James Rumeli McKelvey, U.S. Naval Reserve, born June 9th, 1922, Tulsa, Oklahoma, wounded in action May 3rd, 1945, off Okinawa, died May 25th, 1945 at Guam, at rest here April 10th, 1948. The next grave we're going to be walking up to is that of Oral Roberts. If you don't know who Oral Roberts is, he was a televangelist. He wasn't probably one of the super famous ones, you know, the ones that were kind of mirrored in controversy, but he was up there with the greats. I guess some would also call him a faith healer, depending on if you believe in that or not. Oral Roberts was born January 24th, 1918 in Ada, Oklahoma. And as a kid, youngest of 5 children, grew up very, very poor. He was the son of a pastor. And so later on, he had went to a couple different colleges and kind of dropped out. Didn't really feel like that was the path in life that he wanted to go for. He started preaching on the street corners or what have you. And he got so popular that he would get these big tents and have about, I don't know, like 3,000 folding chairs, and it'd just be like this huge area, and he'd just go there and just kind of preach the word of God. And he got bigger and bigger, going through the 40s and 50s. He built his own church. Of course, if you know the Tulsa area well, there's a Oral Roberts University, big, huge school here in town. And it got so big, his faith organization, that they actually built a hospital. It was more of like, it was kind of like mixed with like prayer and modern medicine. But the hospital ended up going under in 1989. So some other organization, they went ahead and took it over. He wasn't too controversial. You know, he didn't get caught in any scandalous love affairs, but something kind of an odd story about him. He once preached that if he was unable to raise, I think it was $8.2 million, that he was, quote, gonna go see the Lord early. Now, a lot of people thought that he was gonna take his own life. He ended up raising a little over $9 million, but people kind of questioned his fundraising tactics after that one. And people also, you know, for a man who was so poor, I mean, he lived kind of a lavish lifestyle. And he had a couple homes here. He had a couple homes, I believe, in California. This is the grave of Granville Oral Roberts. He's buried alongside his wife, Evelyn Lutman Roberts. And yeah, I think, you know, he lived a good life. He lived to be about 91. I believe he died of pneumonia. And at one time, his organization, they were bringing in about $120 million a year, and he had 2,300 employees. This was a big deal, Mr. Roberts here. And that's his son right there. I think I want to say his son actually took his own life. He had came out as being gay, and then, yeah, sad story for that guy. To be in the shadow of your father, and then you're gay. Very, very sad. This is Mr. Roberts' daughter, Rebecca Roberts Nash, and this is her husband. They both died in an airplane crash in 1977. Yeah, very sad, very tragic to lose both your kids so young like that. And yeah. Oh, and Oral Roberts University, guys, you did have to sign a promise to not smoke, not drink, and not have premarital sex. I'm not sure how many kids actually follow through with any of those, because I think that's what a lot of college kids do for fun, is those three things. But nonetheless, yeah, so rest in peace to Granville Oral Roberts, his wife Evelyn, and their children, Rebecca Roberts Nash and Ronald Roberts. The next grave we are walking up to is one of NBA basketball player Raymond Tisdell. Raymond Tisdell was the second overall pick in the 1985 NBA draft. He was drafted by the Indiana Pacers. That draft is a little bit controversial because of the whole Patrick Ewing thing. Patrick Ewing went first that year. Raymond Tisdell went second. And I think Chris Mullins went third. So you had three solid NBA basketball players, to say the least. And later on, after playing with the Pacers, he went to go play with the Sacramento Kings. Had a pretty good backcourt with him and Mitch Richmond. And then he finished his career with the Phoenix Suns. He played about 12 years in the NBA. He finished with 12,878 points, 5,117 rebounds, and 1,077 assists. He is a 1984 Olympic gold medal winner. And also, when he went to Oklahoma, he has the record in that school still of scoring the most points in the first 2 years of any basketball player that played for Oklahoma. He retired in 1997. He could have played a few more years, but he retired because he wanted to play music. He was a bass guitarist. One of his albums actually, I believe, or one of his songs, reached #1 on the Billboard Top 100 Jazz Contemporary charts. And his number 23 jersey is retired for Oklahoma, but Blake Griffin got permission from him to wear 23 while he was playing for Oklahoma. This is Raymond Tisdell. Raymond's smile was contagious. His quick wit and humor was infectious. A merry heart does good like a medicine. And sadly, this guy was home and he had fell, if I recall the story correctly, he might have fell and broke his leg. And when he went to the hospital, they were doing an x-ray and they seen some kind of a cyst or a growth in his leg, and it turned out to be cancer. And he had started chemotherapy. He ended up having to have that leg amputated later on. But during his musical career, he came out with 8 albums, and this guy was a pretty good bassist. I believe music might have actually even been his first love over basketball, because he could have played another 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, he was a good ball player. And yeah, very, very sad story. He didn't die of the cancer in itself, but he passed away from collapsed esophagus. But I'm pretty sure that was secondary due to, the chemotherapy that he went through. So if ever you're in the Memorial Park Cemetery and you're driving by, there's the Walgreens on that corner right there. Stop by, pay your respect. If you're an NBA basketball player and you remember playing, seeing him play with Mitch Richmond and the Kings, that's what I know him from when I was a little kid, playing with the Kings. Stop by and pay your respects to this man. Rest in peace, Raymond Tisdell, number 23. Okay, that concludes the tour. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Live but not live, but still alive. By the grace of God, I am Lamont at large. I will see you on the next episode. Be good out there, y'all. Peace out.